Doing out here?
I'm out here with Nike, man, doing the Forever King, tour. Out here in China, a couple cities. First stop is Shanghai. Just about the game of basketball, always inspiring the youth, but also, out here on a shoe launch. I got a new sneaker that's dropping in LeBron 23, which is a big moment for me. Number I've worn, pretty much my whole career. Obviously inspired by MJ. We out here, man. It's just cool.
LeBron James just broke his silence, and what he said could change everything we thought we knew about his billion-dollar empire. The man who turned sweat and sneakers into a financial dynasty worth over $1 billion is now watching the whole thing shake at its foundation, and nobody, not his fans, not his business partners, not even the people closest to him, fully saw this coming. This isn't a story about missed shots or bad seasons. This is about betrayal, about money, about a legacy that took 20 years to build and might be unraveling faster than anyone wants to admit. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to see LeBron James in a way you never have before.
Now, 4 hours before that we'd gotten the last sign-off. And the truth is, it's been a lot of work. We took 3 companies that were all our companies, Uninterrupted, the robot company, Spring Hill Entertainment. We brought them together. It's been a lot of work on the people side, just bringing people together, leveling all that. But the truth is, our mission of empowerment, it's a grand mission, right? Empowering every individual, doing that through content, entertainment, and brands.
Let's take it back for a second, because to understand how serious this situation really is, you have to understand what LeBron actually built. Most people see LeBron as a basketball player, one of the greatest ever, sure, but LeBron stopped being just a basketball player a long time ago. By 2025, LeBron James had quietly constructed one of the most powerful personal business empires in sports history. We're talking about a man who looked at what athletes before him had done, taken their checks, bought some cars, maybe invested in a restaurant, and said, "No, I'm doing something different." He built Spring Hill Company from the ground up, a full media and entertainment production company, creating content, producing films, telling stories, not just attaching his name to someone else's project, actually owning the infrastructure. He co-founded Uninterrupted, a platform designed to give athletes their own voice, without filters, without media middlemen, without anyone telling them what they could and couldn't say. He secured a stake in one of the most valuable sports ownership groups on the planet. He launched a premium tequila brand that exploded in the market. He signed media deals. He locked in lifetime endorsement agreements. He was reportedly exploring the possibility of owning an NBA franchise, which would have made him one of the very few former players to ever cross that line. Think about that. A kid from Akron, Ohio, who grew up without much of anything, building a portfolio that Forbes valued at over $1 billion. That's not just success, that's a statement. That's a whole different category of human achievement. And that's exactly why what happened next hit so differently. Because you don't just stumble into losing a $1 billion legacy. Something has to go catastrophically, fundamentally wrong.
You probably lost a lot of trust in media, I would assume, because of the things that happened. Not just what was said on TV, but what it led other people to probably think they should say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
right?
It all started with the decision. It all started with the decision. The decision really had me sit back and because people literally I give a moment. So the decision, it was brought to me to be able to, do something cool on TV, do a kind of college style. And like I said, never had.
Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. In early 2025, and this is something that has not been fully picked up by mainstream media yet, sources close to LeBron's inner circle began describing serious tension around one of his core business partnerships. Not a public argument, not a Twitter beef, something much quieter and much more dangerous than that. Behind closed doors, there were reportedly broken agreements, disputes over creative direction and financial control, and growing frustration from LeBron's side that certain people he trusted with critical pieces of his empire were not holding up their end of what had been promised. Now here's the thing about LeBron, and this is something people don't always give him credit for. He is not just a celebrity who signs off on deals and lets other people run things. He is genuinely, deeply involved in his businesses. He reads the contracts, he sits in the meetings, he asks the questions. So when something goes wrong in his world, it's not because he wasn't paying attention, it's because someone he chose to trust made a decision that broke that trust. And in 2025, that's exactly what happened. The details of exactly what went sideways are still being kept close to the chest, and we want to be clear, we're not here to speculate beyond what's been described by people with real proximity to the situation. But what those sources consistently say is this: the fallout was big enough to put hundreds of millions of dollars at risk. Not pocket change, not a business setback you shrug off and move on from. We're talking about the kind of financial turbulence that can rewrite the entire story of what your legacy looks like. And LeBron, he knew. He saw it happening. And for a while, he made a very deliberate choice to say absolutely nothing. Let's talk about the silence, because this part of the story matters more than most people realize. For weeks in 2025, LeBron James went unusually quiet. If you were paying close attention to his social media, to his public appearances, to the way his team was communicating, something felt off. The energy was different, the presence was muted. No major interviews, carefully managed appearances, his PR operation working overtime to keep the narrative neutral. And in the world we live in now, silence isn't invisible. Silence is loud. Fans started noticing. Comment sections started filling up with questions. People who follow LeBron's business moves closely started connecting dots that didn't quite add up, and the speculation, the rumors, the theories, the half-informed takes started spreading faster than any official statement could have hoped to contain. Here's the brutal irony of that silence. It probably made things worse, because when someone at LeBron's level goes quiet, the world doesn't go quiet with them. The world gets louder. Every pause gets filled with someone else's narrative, and the longer you stay quiet, the more of your story gets written by people who don't know the full truth. Sources say the silence was strategic, that LeBron and his team were trying to protect certain relationships, certain deals that were still in play, that speaking out too early could have accelerated the damage rather than contained it. And look, from a pure business standpoint, that logic makes sense. You don't blow up an ongoing negotiation by going public before you have to. But from a legacy standpoint, from the standpoint of the hundreds of millions of fans who have invested emotionally in LeBron as a symbol of what's possible, that silence had a cost. It created doubt, and once doubt gets into people's minds, it's not easy to remove. Think you know where this is going? Hold on. Because what LeBron said when he finally did speak is the part that nobody expected. Here's where everything changed. At some point in 2025, in a setting that sources describe as intentionally low-key, almost deliberately understated given the weight of what was being discussed, LeBron James broke his silence, and the way he did it matters just as much as what he actually said. This wasn't a polished press release. It wasn't a carefully staged media moment with a PR team standing just off camera making sure every word hit the right note. By all accounts, what happened was something much rawer and more human than that. People who were close to the situation describe it as unscripted, honest in a way that felt almost uncomfortable, because LeBron James has spent 20 years being one of the most media-trained athletes on the planet. He knows exactly how to say the right thing in the right way at the right time. This wasn't that. What LeBron reportedly communicated, and fragments of this have started circulating in 2025 through people with genuine proximity to his circle, was that he felt exposed, that he had trusted people and processes that had let him down in ways he was still processing, and that the version of his future he had been building towards was going to look different than what he had planned. One thing he reportedly said that has been discussed repeatedly among those who heard it was that the money was never actually the point, that what hurt wasn't the financial exposure. What hurt was the feeling that something he had poured his identity into had been treated carelessly by people who should have protected it the way he protected it. That's not the language of a businessman who lost a deal. That's the language of someone who lost something personal. And that distinction, that gap between financial damage and personal betrayal, is what makes this story so much heavier than a typical celebrity business scandal. Because LeBron built his empire as an extension of who he is. Spring Hill wasn't just a company. Uninterrupted wasn't just a platform. These things were statements. They were proof of concept. They were his answer to every person who ever said athletes should just shut up and play. To have any part of that threatened from the inside, that hits different. Now, let's talk about consequences. Because the story doesn't end with LeBron speaking out. In some ways, that's where the real complexity begins. The moment any hint of instability gets attached to a brand at this level, the ripple effects are immediate and unforgiving. Business partners start asking quiet questions. People who are enthusiastic about future deals suddenly become harder to reach. Investment conversations that were moving forward develop a new layer of hesitation, not because anyone necessarily thinks the empire is collapsing, but because in the business world, perception is currency. And the perception, even for a moment of uncertainty around a billion-dollar brand, can do serious damage. Sources with knowledge of LeBron's business landscape in 2025 describe a period of partners going cold, of conversations that slowed down when they should have been accelerating, of deals that were close to the finish line getting quietly tabled while people waited to see how the situation resolved. And here's the number that keeps coming up in these conversations: $1 billion. That's the valuation that LeBron's brand empire had been tracking toward, the symbolic threshold that would have made him one of the very first athletes in history to achieve billionaire status, primarily through business rather than through contracts and endorsements alone. That milestone, that number, is now in real question. Not because LeBron is broke, not because his empire is in free fall, but because the trajectory changed. Because the momentum that was building toward that number hit a wall in 2025 that no one on the outside fully saw coming. And for a man who has spent his entire adult life obsessively chasing legacy, not just fame, but permanent, generational legacy, having that trajectory disrupted is not something you just shake off. LeBron James has been in high-stakes situations his entire career. He's been booed in arenas. He's been called a villain. He's had his decisions dissected and mocked and debated on every platform imaginable. He's lost finals. He's been counted out. He's come back from things that should have ended careers. But this is different terrain. On a basketball court, he knows exactly how to respond. He knows the rules. He knows his body. He knows the game better than almost anyone who has ever played it. In the arena of business betrayal and reputational damage at this scale, the playbook is less clear and the opponents are less obvious. Let's zoom out for a second. Let's look at this from the widest possible angle. LeBron James has always been playing two games simultaneously. One on the court, which even now in 2025 remains remarkable, and one off it, which was supposed to be his real masterpiece. The on-court game has a natural ending. Age is undefeated. Every player, no matter how great, eventually walks off the court for the last time. LeBron knows this. He's always known this. It's part of why he worked so obsessively to build something that would outlast basketball. The whole point of everything he constructed, the companies, the deals, the stakes, the media presence, was to ensure that when basketball was done, LeBron James didn't just become a legend who used to play. He would still be a force, still building, still creating, still relevant in a way that didn't require him to lace up sneakers. That was the vision. That was the plan. And right now, in 2025, that plan is navigating the most serious turbulence it has ever faced. But here's the thing about LeBron that his most thoughtful observers keep coming back to when this situation comes up. He has been here before. Not here exactly, not with this specific kind of threat to this specific part of his life, but in impossible situations, in moments where the narrative was completely against him, in stretches where everyone watching felt certain they were seeing the beginning of his end. And every single time, he found a way. The question being asked in circles that follow his business life closely right now is not whether LeBron will respond to this. Everyone who knows him says he will respond. The question is what form that response takes. Does he restructure and double down on the parts of his empire that are still strong? Does he find a new partner, a new direction, a new chapter that reframes this entire episode as a pivot rather than a loss? Does he use this moment, as uncomfortable and exposed as it is, to say something publicly that actually humanizes him in a way that manufactured PR never could? Because there's another possibility that nobody is talking about openly, but that people around him seem to quietly believe. This moment, as painful as it is, might actually be the most authentic version of LeBron James the public has ever been allowed to see. Not the perfectly branded athlete mogul, not the carefully curated image, but a real person who built something real, who got hurt by real betrayal, and is now figuring out in real time how to protect everything he spent his whole life creating. And if he lets people see that, if he lets the world into that process rather than managing it from a distance, the loyalty and goodwill that comes back to him might ultimately be worth more than whatever was lost. Legacy isn't built in the good moments. Anyone can look great when everything is going right. Legacy is built in the hard ones. LeBron James has spent over 20 years building something that no athlete had quite built before. A billion-dollar empire rooted not just in talent, but in vision, in relentlessness, and in an almost stubborn refusal to accept the limits that the world tried to put on him. 2025 has tested that vision in ways that are still playing out. The silence, the fallout, the broken trust, the financial stakes, none of it is fully resolved, none of it is comfortable. But here's what we know about LeBron James. He has never, not once in his career, let a hard moment be his last word. The billion-dollar legacy isn't dead, but it is being rebuilt. And what it looks like on the other side of this, that might be the most interesting chapter of his story yet. So I want to ask you this, and I genuinely want to hear what you think. Can LeBron fully recover from this, or is this the crack in the foundation that changes his legacy forever? Drop your answer in the comments, because I think this one is going to divide people. If you made it this far, you already know this channel doesn't do surface level. We go deep. We go real. Hit that subscribe button, because the stories we're covering next, you don't want to miss them.